21% of the world's surface fresh water is locked within 5 massive basins, providing life-sustaining drinking water to over 40 million people across North America today. Beneath these waves lies a powerhouse of commerce, where $6 trillion of business activity flows through shipping lanes that connect the heart of the continent to the world. But right now, something is deeply wrong because every one of these massive inland seas is dropping, with Lake Michigan-Huron sitting nearly 8 inches below its long-term average this summer. Across the vast American Midwest, nearly half of the region was recently marked as suffering from severe drought or unusually dry conditions. Throughout this past unusually warm and difficult winter, the massive cargo ships that keep the steel mills of America alive are quietly leaving thousands of tons of cargo behind because the water is simply too shallow to sail. Within the world's biggest freshwater system, a terrifying change is unfolding, and the growing worry among scientists and economic leaders is reaching a fever pitch as the shoreline rapidly retreats. Just 6 years ago, in 2020, the biggest problem facing the Great Lakes was actually too much water, with waves crashing violently over Lake Shore Drive in the city Chicago. Beachfront homes along the Michigan coast were sliding into the cold water, and whole sections of the major highway were close to falling apart under the pressure of the rising tide. Property owners in the state of Indiana were losing over 100 feet of beachfront in a single season, forcing the construction of emergency seawalls to hold back the crashing surf. Today, the situation has flipped entirely as ship captains stand on their bridges with depth gauges and calculators, desperate to figure out how much cargo they can carry without hitting bottom. According to the federal report from April 2026, Lake Superior sits 4 inches below its average, while Lake Michigan-Huron is struggling at 6 inches below its typical spring levels. Lake Erie sits 4 inches below, yet Lake Ontario is the strange outlier, actually sitting 5 inches above average because its outflow is actively controlled through a deal with Canada. While the upper 4 lakes remain at the mercy of rain, snow, and evaporation, Lake Ontario gets managed, explaining why it acts so differently from the rest of the massive system. A few inches might not sound like a major crisis in casual conversation, but when you do the math, every single inch of Lake Michigan represents roughly 390 billion gallons. Across all 5 Great Lakes combined, just one single inch of depth accounts for 1,600 billion gallons, while a single foot equals nearly 20 trillion gallons of water. These are not small changes. They are massive amounts of liquid hidden inside small-sounding numbers. And this is the first time every upper lake has been low in over 10 years. To understand the true scale of this crisis, we must look at the city of Chicago, which pulls 2,100,000,000 gallons of water every single day. This massive, ongoing drain operates 365 days a year, yet its measurable effect on the water level of Lake Michigan is only about 1 single inch. Consider that the total bottled water used in the United States for a full year is roughly 1/30th of what it takes to lower this lake by that inch. These lakes do not move easily, so when they move at all, it means something truly massive and potentially catastrophic is happening within the global climate and water cycle. For the first time in over 10 years, every upper lake is below its long-term average, reminding us of the brutal stretch that ran from 1998 to 2013. During that dark period, docks sat on dry ground, and cargo ships hit bottom in shipping lanes before the cycle ended in January 2013, with record low readings. After 13 years of rising water that set all-time highs in 2020, the system is now swinging back toward drought with a speed that has shocked every expert. Lake Michigan dropped 17 inches between January 2024 and January 2026, representing nearly 7 trillion gallons of fresh water gone from just one single basin. That is enough water to supply every home in the United States for roughly 9 months, and it did not leave because somebody opened a giant drain in the bottom dollar. It left because of a water balance rule so simple it is almost a joke. Rain and snow plus runoff, minus the silent but deadly power of evaporation. For most of the last 10 years, the math tilted heavily toward water coming in, with the 5-year stretch until 2020 being the wettest in recorded history. But starting in the fall of 2023, the basin turned dry, followed by an even drier 2024 and a disastrously low rainfall during 2025. 3 consecutive fall seasons with below-average moisture occurred right when the lakes were supposed to be topping off and refilling their basins, before the harsh winter locked them down. This pattern of back-to-back autumn shortages has not happened since the early 2000s, and the last time it did, the lakes took 10 years to climb back. The summer of 2025 made it worse, as lake surface temperatures climbed to near record highs, setting the stage for a massive loss of water to the atmosphere. Evaporation is highest when cold, dry winter air blows across warm, open water, and a hot summer followed by a cold winter is the worst setup for survival. Seasonal ice cover has dropped by about 25% over the past 50 years, and February 2024 saw basin-wide ice at a shocking 7%. Less ice means more open water for more weeks, creating an endless cycle of evaporation that ran above normal on almost every Great Lake through early 2026. This represents a system losing water during the very months when it is supposed to be gaining it, a fundamental shift that is incredibly difficult to undo or reverse. If every faucet and factory shut down tomorrow, the lakes would still take over 100 years to refill to their previous levels from where they sit today. The Great Lakes support a $17 billion shipping industry where cargo ships carry iron ore from Minnesota to the massive steel mills located in Gary, Indiana, every single season. For a typical 1,000-foot laker, every single inch of water level loss forces the ship to lighten its heavy load by roughly 270 tons to avoid bottoming. At the fleet level, this results in $30,000 of lost earnings per inch for every single trip, adding up to millions of dollars across a fleet of ships. In October of 2025, water levels on the St. Lawrence River dropped nearly 2 meters below normal near Montreal, leaving marinas and longtime boat owners in a state of shock. One boat owner suffered almost $50,000 in propeller damage from hitting rocks that are normally hidden deep below the surface, proving that low water is an expensive disaster. 40 million people across the United States and Canada rely on these basins for tap water, but dropping levels mean intake pipes pull from shallower, warmer water, fueling dangerous algae blooms. In 2014, a harmful bloom polluted the water supply of Toledo, leaving nearly 500,000 people unable to drink from their own taps for an entire terrifying week. Upgrading drinking water and wastewater systems to handle these changing levels is expected to cost roughly $180 billion over the next 20 years across the entire region. Niagara Falls hosts the largest hydropower complex in North America, with the Robert Moses plant alone producing 2,525 megawatts, enough to power nearly 2 million homes. If these low levels persist through 2050, the power industry faces nearly $3 billion in replacement costs, as clean hydro energy is forced out by expensive natural gas alternatives. Every industry is interconnected, and as the water disappears, the financial ripple effects stack up, creating a trillion-dollar problem that no single rainy season can ever hope to solve. Beyond the money, the very foundations of the Midwestern economy are cracking under the pressure of a shifting climate that refuses to follow the predictable patterns of the past century. From the steel mills of Indiana to the marinas of Quebec, the message is clear. The era of cheap, reliable, and abundant water in the Great Lakes is officially over. As of 2026, we are witnessing the beginning of a massive economic transition that will redefine how 40 million people live, work, and survive on these inland shores. This crisis is not just about the environment. It is a fundamental threat to the $6 trillion of business that relies on the steady, predictable flow of the lakes. Without urgent adaptation, the backbone of American and Canadian industry will continue to weaken, leaving cities and factories vulnerable to the chaotic swings of a system we no longer control. Beyond the massive cargo ships and the multi-billion-dollar power plants, there is a quieter but far more devastating tragedy unfolding within the delicate coastal wetlands of the lakes. These vibrant, reed-filled edges are the nurseries of the system, where more than 70% of all Great Lake fish species must spawn and grow to survive every single year. From walleye and northern pike to yellow perch and smallmouth bass, The entire multi-million-dollar fishing industry depends on these shallow, protected waters staying connected to the lake. Lake Erie has already suffered the loss of 72% of its historic wetland habitat since the arrival of European settlers, leaving the remaining ecosystem fragile and highly vulnerable. If water levels drop significantly in Georgian Bay, researchers warn that 13% of its 3,700 coastal wetlands could be cut off from the main lake system entirely. When the water leaves, the critical fish habitat disappears with it, followed by the collapse of food chains for over 350 species of migrating birds that stop there. While the shipping industry can eventually adapt and drinking water systems can be upgraded with billions of dollars, these ancient wetlands do not simply come back once they are gone. As this environmental crisis unfolds in the background, the ripple effects are already tearing through local communities, forcing governments to issue desperate declarations of emergency across the region. More than 15 Michigan counties have now been officially labeled as natural disaster areas due to extreme drought, with 4 more added in April of 2026 alone. These labels include Kent and Allegan counties, while Ohio has been struggling under fast-track drought designations that date back to September of the year 2025. In eastern Ontario, 4 out of 6 water management boards issued severe low water warnings last fall, while several Quebec towns actually had to ship in water to survive. The Port of Duluth in Minnesota, once a titan of trade, is now physically shrinking as a major grain terminal closed its doors in September of 2025. A vital coal terminal in the same port announced it will shut down by the summer of 2026 as the business base collapses due to unpredictable water levels. The problem in Duluth is not that the market for grain or coal disappeared, but that the logistics of shipping have become an impossible gamble with no clear future. Then, in late March of 2026, a frightening event occurred in Whitefish Bay when a dozen cargo ships became trapped in 2 feet of thick, frozen ice. Adding to the chaos, 3 feet of snow sat on top of the ice, and the only heavy Coast Guard icebreaker, the Mackinac, suffered a catastrophic engine failure. The ship could not even pass through the Soo locks to reach the trapped fleet, leaving steel mills without raw materials for over 2 full months during the crisis. While this was not a low-water event, it serves as a stark warning of how fragile the entire infrastructure has become when any single piece of the system fails. The combination of shrinking ice cover, unpredictable depths, and aging machinery is creating a perfect storm that threatens the stability of the entire North American heartland. Everything explained so far is true, but it is not the real story behind the chaos currently unfolding across these massive and unpredictable freshwater basins. Local news tells this as a simple drought story, but the truth is that the Great Lakes have become wildly impossible for any expert to predict. Look at the timeline where January 2013 saw record lows, only for the same lakes to hit all-time record highs just 7 years later in 2020. Now, in April 2026, the system is swinging back again, marking 3 extreme states within a period of only 13 years of observation. This is not a drought pattern. It is a system swinging wildly between extremes, and no one watching these lakes has seen things move this fast before. Scientific views have shifted, and fast swings between record highs and record lows are now seen as the new baseline for the entire Great Lakes system. We are caught in a tug-of-war where rainfall and snow are actually increasing, yet evaporation rates have more than doubled since the 1980s. Older climate models from the 1990s have been thrown out because they failed to account for the complex and aggressive nature of modern evaporation. New research suggests that water levels might actually rise by 17 inches by 2040, but the only certainty remains absolute and terrifying uncertainty. Infrastructure must now be built to handle both extreme flooding and extreme drought within the same decade, requiring a total rethink of our modern world. For the 40 million people living there, the story of steady and reliable water is over, replaced by a system that breathes in and out with violent intensity. The real question is whether our $6 trillion economy can adjust to a world where the floor and the ceiling of the lakes no longer exist. As the numbers update next week and the drought map shifts again, we must prepare for a future that refuses to follow the rules of the past. If you want to see what happens when a major water system truly fails, Click the video on screen to explore the collapse of the Colorado River